This year, I told myself not to expect much. Maybe not warmth, but softness. A little space where the air didn't feel like eggshells. I don't even know why I let myself believe it might be different. Maybe it was because I'd been working nonstop, too tired to spiral through old patterns. Maybe it was because she actually said thank you when I helped with her taxes last month, and for once, it didn't sound like an obligation. Or maybe it was the text. She replied to my brunch confirmation with a smiley face. Not an emoji. An old school colon and parenthesis, like she used to send me in middle school, back before I became too much, too distant, too other. That tiny curve of pixels cracked something open in me. So I let myself hope. I went all out. Bought her favorite perfume, the same scent she wore when I was 5, and she still called me her little man. I picked up fresh-cut tulips from a local florist, not the discounted buckets near checkout lanes. And I wrote a letter, a real one, handwritten, thought out, vulnerable in a way I hadn't let myself be in years. In it, I told her the truth, that I knew things hadn't always been easy for her, that I was grateful for what she gave up, that I loved her even if it no longer felt mutual. I wasn't begging, I wasn't bitter, just honest. I tucked the letter into a red envelope. It looked bold against the soft cream of the stationery. Hopeful, maybe even healing. This brunch, I thought, could be a reset. She had me young, barely out of high school. It was messy, sure, but for a long time it was just us. Laughing on the floor with cheap takeout and reruns of old sitcoms. Then came Jake. She met him when I was 10. And at first he seemed like a good thing. He brought order, routine. A man who folded laundry without being asked. And then he stayed. They married fast. My half-brother Ethan came not long after, and everything shifted. Suddenly, I wasn't a son. I was an echo, a leftover, a reminder of choices she wanted to forget. Jake never said that out loud, but you could feel it, in how he'd say our boy and mean Ethan, in how he never called me his stepson unless someone cornered him with a direct question. But still, I kept trying. That morning, pulling into their driveway with a small gift bag and too much hope, I felt like maybe I'd finally earned a seat at the table. Not out of guilt or blood, but out of effort. The house looked like it always did for holidays: linen napkins, glass pitchers of juice, Pinterest-worthy place settings. She put energy into things that looked good. And I thought, maybe today I was one of those things. When I walked in, she glanced up from arranging the silverware. "Oh, you made it," she said. And for half a second, I thought she meant it. I handed her the tulips. Her eyes skimmed over them like she was checking a receipt. "Oh, these are pretty," she murmured, already turning back to the table. I told myself not to overanalyze. I placed the perfume on the counter near her. They only had one left. She barely looked at it. "This one again?" she said, more confused than pleased. "I haven't worn this in years." It wasn't cold, just observed, like someone cataloging objects for inventory. I sat down. My place had a napkin, no card, no mimosa. I poured myself juice and kept my smile steady. Jake asked how work was going, then turned away before I finished answering. My mom was fiddling with the centerpiece. Ethan was ranting about his econ professor, who apparently looked like someone who'd never held a real job. Everyone laughed. No one looked at me. I tried to shake it off. The letter was still in my jacket pocket, burning a hole through the lining. I kept replaying the timing in my head. Should I hand it to her before dessert? After coffee? Was it too much? Too raw? "Anyone want more coffee?" I asked halfway through the meal. No one answered. Then Ethan looked at me and smirked. "So, do you, celebrate Mother's Day from a distance now? Or is this your charity visit?" Jake laughed. My mom sipped her drink, said nothing. I smiled like it didn't land. "Didn't bring a coupon, just a gift." Ethan snorted. "Cool. Did you Venmo it this year, or?" "Nope," I said, pulling the letter from my pocket. "This time it's in writing." I placed the envelope gently beside her plate, red against white, a flare against silence. She blinked at it, uncertain, like I'd handed her something fragile and illegal. Then Ethan scoffed. "What is that, a love letter? Jesus." "Nope," I said, "just a thank you." The table went still. And then someone asked if we had any more butter. Just like that, it moved on. After brunch, I helped clear the table, took the dishes to the kitchen. I noticed the trash bags were already out by the garage. That was fast, but she liked things clean, efficient. I told myself it was nothing. Still, I went outside, just to toss some napkins. The garage door was cracked open, sunlight pooling onto the concrete like a spotlight, and there by the bins was the bag. Black plastic, light catching on the crinkles, and leaning against it my letter, still sealed. The red envelope already bent from being tossed in, the perfume box, the tulips, crushed sideways, barely holding their shape. She'd thrown it all away. I didn't move for a long time. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was something hotter, sharper, like heat crawling up the back of my neck and settling behind my eyes, just enough to blur the edges of the world. No one was watching. No one ever was. I crouched down, took it all back. The envelope, the flowers, the perfume. I held them for a second like they might explain themselves. Like maybe they'd tell me why I kept hoping for more. Then I walked to my car, sat in the driver's seat with the engine off, the letter resting on the passenger seat like a witness, a casualty, a joke. I'd written lines like, "I'm proud of the woman you became. I know it wasn't always easy, but you showed up, you tried, and I love you even when I feel invisible." I stared at the envelope. Then I drove home. No door slamming, no texts, just quiet. That night, I placed the gifts on my kitchen counter. The tulips were already wilting, the letter still unopened, the perfume unopened too, the cellophane still intact like it had never been touched. And I stared at them, not to mourn them, but to mourn me. The version of me that still believed maybe this time would be different. I didn't sleep much. But before the sun came up, I made a decision. And by morning, she was calling non-stop. By the time my phone started buzzing again, the sun had barely stretched over the city skyline. Her name lit up the screen like a warning label. At first it was just calls, then texts, all with that same nervous energy masked behind casual wording. "Hey, can we talk? You left in kind of a weird mood yesterday. Hope everything's okay." She didn't mention the envelope, didn't mention the perfume or the flowers, which told me everything I needed to know. Either she didn't see where they ended up, or she did, and hoped I didn't. I sat in the kitchen with my coffee, staring at the wilted tulips like they held some kind of secret. They didn't. They were just tired flowers. Same as me. I didn't text her back. I didn't even open the messages. I just let the screen light up and go dark and light up again like it was pulsing with guilt she couldn't name. And it was weird because I wasn't mad. Not exactly. I just felt hollow. Like I had finally reached the part where trying wasn't noble anymore. It was just stupid. It's funny how you can love someone and still get to the point where their voice makes your stomach drop. When I was younger, I used to think change was gradual, that things drifted apart slowly, like tectonic plates. But now I know some breaks happen in a moment, a sharp sound you can't take back. Like the crack of a letter hitting the bottom of a trash bin. That was mine. I think what broke me more than the letter being tossed was how easily it happened. No hesitation, no guilt, just a reflex. Like kindness from me was garbage unless it came with a receipt. I remembered how, years ago, I used to wait by the front door with handmade cards and paper tulips when I was little. How she'd tape them to the fridge for a week before they disappeared. How she smiled back then like it mattered. Maybe she meant it back then. But somewhere along the line, she learned to love the things that came easier. Jake with his paycheck and clean lines. Ethan with his predictable path and wide grin. And me, I was the complicated one. I came with old memories, awkward timing, and a whole lot of unasked for history. So she tucked me away into a quieter space. A side drawer, a back shelf, out of sight, and easy to forget. That morning, something inside me shifted. I walked to my laptop, still in pajamas, sat down, and opened my utility accounts. Gas, water, power, all set to auto-deduct from my account. Not anymore. I paid the final balance and removed my name. Just like that, gone. Then the tuition transfer I'd scheduled for Ethan's next semester. It was still pending. Canceled. The confirmation email popped up with a cold blue check mark, and I stared at it like it might blink first. It didn't. And that's when it hit me. For years, I had been doing things they didn't even notice. Quiet things. Helpful things. No applause. No thanks. Just expectations. Like I was their invisible foundation. And when that foundation started to crack, no one asked why. They just complained about the mess. I typed out an email to her, short and plain. Subject, Mother's Day. body. Just a heads up, there was an envelope with cash inside the letter I gave you. It was meant for Ethan's tuition. I figured you'd know what to do with it. Hope it didn't get lost. I hit send and sat back. It wasn't true, of course. There was no money. But she didn't know that. And the thought of her digging through every trash bag with trembling hands looking for something that wasn't there, it didn't bring me joy, it just brought balance. At exactly 8:12 a.m., the real panic started. What do you mean cash? How much was in there? I didn't see any envelope. Then came the calls. Voicemail after voicemail, her voice shaky, bordering on frantic. And I just watched as the weight of what she threw away started to settle on her shoulders. Not just a gift, not just a mistake, something that might have mattered, something she couldn't replace. Later that afternoon, Jake texted me. This is childish. We need to talk. You're creating unnecessary drama. That almost made me laugh. Drama. As if discarding someone's heart was a casual oversight. I didn't reply. Instead, I sent a separate message to 3 people Jake now worked with. People he knew only because I had introduced them. A client, a vendor, and an old friend in HR. The message was simple. Hey, just a quick note. Going forward, please don't associate my name with Jake Whitman. Personal reasons. Thanks for understanding. That's it. No details, no accusations. Just enough space for them to start wondering. And in a network built on image and perception, doubt spreads faster than truth. Within a week, Jake lost a key referral. One client put their contract on hold. Another requested to deal with someone else. I didn't gloat, didn't celebrate, just sat back and watched the strings loosen on their own. That evening, she called again. Voicemail this time, voice cracking, please call me. I didn't know, I didn't see it. If I had known, I never would have. The rest trailed off. She never finished the sentence. Never said what exactly she wouldn't have done, because she couldn't bring herself to say it out loud. She couldn't admit she threw away something she hadn't even bothered to open. I didn't respond, because I realized something. For the first time in my life, the silence wasn't a punishment, it was peace. A wall between me and the hunger of people who only wanted me when I was useful. The next day, my aunt texted me. Just one line, if I were you, I wouldn't answer either. That one hit different, because for years no one saw it. No one saw how much I gave, how I showed up, how I quietly fixed things without credit. But now someone did. Someone finally noticed the imbalance. The equation that never added up. That weekend, I packed the perfume, the letter, and the dried flowers into a small box and slid it onto the top shelf of my closet. Not because I wanted to keep them, but because I needed to remember. Remember the version of me that kept showing up, even when it hurt. Because that version is gone now, and he deserves to rest. By Monday, the text changed tone. No more guilt. No more maybe I messed up energy. Now it was you need to stop this. Enough is enough. Then Jake emailed me, all business. Talking about professional boundaries and family stability like I was a PR problem, not a person. I didn't answer. I didn't even flinch. Because that's the thing about silence. It makes people uncomfortable. It forces them to sit with themselves. And they hate that. They'd rather have a fight than an empty room. But me? I was finally learning to love the quiet. Then Ethan chimed in. He sent a voice memo. His tone was that perfect blend of 19-year-old arrogance and fake wisdom. I know things were never perfect, he started, but seriously, you're ruining Mom's life over. What? Some trash? That one nearly made me smile. Some trash. Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it? They treated me like clutter. Something to hide behind a curtain when guests came over. Something that didn't match the decor. And now that I'm gone, they don't know where anything goes. But still I didn't respond. Because the point of this was never revenge. It was revelation. Letting them really see what it feels like when someone walks away. Not screaming, not slamming doors. Just quietly removing their presence and watching the whole house tilt off balance. They thought I'd always be there. And maybe that was the biggest mistake I ever made, being reliable in a house that never wanted me. But that mistake, I'm not making it again. They say silence is golden, but mine was starting to cost them. I could tell by how quickly the tone of every message shifted from worried to defensive. My mom's earlier voicemails had this breathy kind of panic, like she was still trying to believe this could be fixed with a phone call. But now, she'd stopped tiptoeing. She didn't want to understand. She wanted control. And control always comes wrapped in guilt. Jake wasn't subtle either. He sent a second email, dressed up in professionalism, claiming that my behavior was putting their family reputation at risk and asking if we could return to a place of cooperation. I almost laughed. Cooperation? There was never any cooperation. Just me cleaning up after them, nodding along, pretending I didn't see the difference in how they treated me. What they called stability was just me staying silent. And I wasn't doing that anymore. Then on Thursday afternoon, something happened that crossed the invisible line. My office receptionist buzzed me like there was a fire in the lobby. She whispered into the phone like she couldn't believe what she was saying. There's a woman here, she says she's your mom. I felt my stomach dip like the elevator I took down seconds later. And there she was, standing in the lobby in a cream blazer and polished heels, looking like she was about to give a TED Talk on image management. I hadn't seen her in person since brunch, and honestly, I wouldn't have known what to expect if you'd given me 100 guesses. But seeing her there, so composed and sure of herself, didn't shake me. It clarified everything. She didn't wait for me to greet her. As soon as I stepped out, she said, "Can we talk?" and started walking toward the doors. No hug, no smile, not even a hello. Just straight into control mode. We stepped outside, and the second the glass doors closed behind us, she turned on me. "You've humiliated this family," she said, like it was a statement of fact, not a personal opinion. "Jake's job is at risk. Your brother's upset. You need to stop this now." I looked at her calmly, not even blinking. "I haven't said a word to anyone that wasn't mine to say," I replied. She scoffed, arms folding, jaw tight. "Over one letter? One party? You're blowing this way out of proportion." I tilted my head slightly, studying her face. "Is that really what you think this is about?" She looked genuinely confused. Like, she couldn't imagine a world where I might be reacting to more than just that morning. I gave her a second to process. She didn't, so I continued. "You say you raised me," I said, voice steady. "That you gave me a home, clothes, school. And you did, I'm not erasing that. But I also gave. A lot. More than you know, maybe more than you care to admit. I helped pay the mortgage more than once. I covered bills when Jake forgot. I offered to pay for Ethan's college and never once asked for anything back. But even when I gave, you looked right through me. You smiled when he called me half-brother like that was just a harmless joke. You let Jake interrupt me mid-sentence and change the subject like my words weren't worth finishing. You looked me in the eye while I handed you that letter, and still you tossed it in the trash like it was nothing. So no, this isn't about a party. It's about realizing I've been invisible in my own family for years." She tried to cut in, but I held up a hand, not to silence her, to pause her, to finally make her listen. "I saw it," I said. "The envelope, the perfume, the flowers, all of it, stuffed in a garbage bag by the garage before we even cleared the table." Her face shifted then. The sharpness in her expression softened just slightly. Not into sadness, not into regret, into uncertainty. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I thought you took it with you. I wasn't sure." "That's the problem," I said. "You were never sure. Not about me. Not about what mattered. You were so focused on building a new life, you forgot I was part of the old one." She blinked. Her mouth opened, then closed. She had no script for this moment, no tidy response. Finally, she said, "You're not just punishing Jake. You're punishing the whole family." I nodded. Then maybe the whole family should have acted like I was part of it. And I turned and walked back into the building. Her heels clicked behind me for a second, then stopped. She didn't follow. That was the last time I saw her face to face. 2 days later, Ethan posted one of those vague, drama-bait Instagram stories. White text on a black screen. Funny how some people choose silence when things get hard. Don't forget who's really been there. I didn't reply. A cousin messaged me asking if that post was about me. I said probably, and if it was good, because it meant the message landed. Not the lie about the cash that was just strategy. The truth was in the silence, in the choices, in the weight they never realized I was carrying until I put it down. By the end of that week, Jake's stable reputation had started to wobble. Clients I'd introduced him to quietly began to shift away. One canceled a contract without explanation. Another requested new representation. There was no drama, no blow-up, just the slow unraveling of something he'd built on borrowed credibility. My credibility. I didn't feel powerful. I felt released, like I'd finally stopped holding my breath after years of pretending I was fine. After the office visit, my mom's messages slowed. She realized she couldn't guilt me back into place, couldn't pull me back with obligations. So she tried something else, a voice message that was almost syrupy. "We just want to talk," she said, as if this whole thing was a minor misunderstanding instead of a long overdue reckoning. Ethan chimed in at the end with a reluctant, "Sorry, I guess." Jake didn't say a word. I played the message twice, once to hear what they said, once to feel what they didn't. No one said they were wrong. No one said they missed me. They just wanted me back in line. I didn't respond. The next week, my aunt reached out again. She said my mom had been calling family, painting me as the ungrateful one, that I was withholding, distant, cruel. My aunt told her she should have seen it coming, that she was lucky I didn't air it all out online, that she should be grateful I chose silence over spectacle. That message made me smile, because someone finally understood, not just what happened, but what it cost me to walk away without throwing a match behind me. I could have burned it all down, but I didn't. I just left. And the truth is, I wasn't trying to destroy them. I was trying to rebuild myself. Quietly, carefully, away from the noise of a family that only saw me when they needed something. I moved into a new apartment, bigger, brighter, mine. I started hosting small dinners with people who actually asked how I was and waited for the answer. People who didn't make me feel like I was applying to be in their lives. People who didn't measure my worth in favors. Then one night, I got a message. Just one line: "Saw you moved. Hope you're doing well. If you ever want to talk, I'm here." It was from her. No mention of what she did, no apology, no acknowledgement of what she threw away. Just a half door left ajar, hoping I might step through it again. I didn't. I closed the message, made tea, sat on my balcony, and let the city lights remind me that the world was bigger than the four walls I grew up in. And in that quiet, I finally understood. I hadn't lost a family. I had finally stopped begging to belong to one. I didn't expect peace to feel this quiet. For a while, it was strange waking up and not reaching for my phone out of habit, expecting some new plea or performance from someone pretending to care. But eventually, the silence stopped feeling like a vacuum and started feeling like air. Real air. The kind you can finally breathe without it catching in your chest. I got better at noticing things, my own routines, my own space. I started going to the same cafe every Thursday, and the barista began remembering my order. I planted herbs on my kitchen windowsill and actually kept them alive. The quiet didn't make me lonely. It made me real. For the first time in years, I wasn't editing myself to fit into a frame someone else built. I was finally painting my own walls, literally and figuratively. And in that new rhythm, I saw just how much of myself I'd handed over in pieces. Not just in favors or money, but in forgiveness I was never asked for and grace I was never offered. The day I took my name off their bills, I started writing a list, not for revenge, not to tally up the past, just to remind myself that I was never as invisible as they made me feel. I listed every ride I gave Ethan when Mom was too tired, every resume I edited for Jake even when he didn't say thank you, every time I swallowed my own sadness just to keep a holiday from falling apart, every small effort that felt like love but was treated like noise. That list wasn't long to brag, it was long to heal. Because every line reminded me that I showed up even when no one asked me to, and especially when they should have. The thing about being the quiet one, the fixer, the reliable presence, is that people start believing you're made of steel, that you don't feel the cracks because you never make noise when they spread. But even steel rusts. Even the strongest structure collapses if no one maintains it. And I had been crumbling for years, quietly, while they built new memories without me. The baby photos that didn't include me. The Christmas cards where my name was conveniently missing. The birthday dinner that was just for immediate family. I wasn't being excluded out of cruelty. That would have at least required awareness. No, I was being erased out of convenience, because it was easier to pretend I was background noise than to admit they'd failed me. Sometimes I'd catch myself reading the old texts she used to send, the ones from before Jake, the ones where she signed off with hearts and called me her little star. I used to believe that person still existed somewhere, that the mother who held me through the flu at age 8 and baked cupcakes for my class at 9 was just buried under adult stress. that one day she'd resurface. But now I wasn't so sure. Maybe that version of her was real once, or maybe I just needed her to be. Either way, I stopped looking for her in the present, because the version of her who looked me in the eye at brunch and said, "Oh, you remembered this one," like I'd brought a receipt instead of a memory, that version didn't want me. Not really. Weeks passed. I blocked Jake after he emailed again, this time trying to be diplomatic, claiming we should put the past behind us for the family's sake. The family's sake. The same family that never made room for me at the table. The same one that never once asked how I was doing after college. The same family that only seemed to remember I existed when something needed fixing. I blocked Ethan too, after he sent another voice note calling me dramatic and selfish, and saying I was ruining things just because I couldn't handle being left out. Left out? I wasn't left out. I was shut out, rewritten. And now they were mad the story was no longer going their way. Eventually, the calls stopped. The texts slowed. The guilt trips dried up like a well no one remembered to refill. I didn't miss the noise. I didn't miss the confusion. I didn't even miss the hope, because what they never understood is that I didn't walk away to punish them. I walked away because staying had become a betrayal to myself. Every time I showed up and was treated like a guest in a home I partially funded, I shrank. Every time I smiled through a joke that made me the punchline, I disappeared a little more. And one day, I just ran out of space to disappear into. A month after I moved, I got a card in the mail, handwritten. From her. One recognized the cursive right away. It used to be the same handwriting on my lunchbox notes in elementary school. I stared at the envelope for a minute before opening it. Inside, it said, "I don't know where we went wrong, but I'm sorry if I made you feel unloved. You've always been important to me. Always." No specifics. No mention of the letter, the trash bag, or the things she chose not to see. Just vague sorrow dressed up like reflection. It wasn't enough. Because if she didn't know where it went wrong, then she hadn't been paying attention. And that was the problem. It had never been one moment. It had been years of quiet slips, slow fades, small wounds that never got cleaned. I didn't write back. I folded the card and placed it in the same box as the perfume and the dead flowers. Not out of anger, not to hold on to pain, just as a record, a silent archive of the things I tried to give and the silence I received in return. That box wasn't a shrine to sadness. It was proof I'd tried, proof that I had loved enough to hurt. And that's not something I was ashamed of anymore. If anything, it made me proud. One Sunday, I hosted dinner for a few friends. We laughed over mismatched plates and homemade pasta. There were no place cards, no linen napkins, just warmth. One of them spilled red wine on the tablecloth and apologized, but I waved it off. It wasn't about presentation. It was about presence. Someone asked what my family was like, and I paused. Then I said, "Complicated, but I'm building a better version." And I meant it, because the people at that table asked how my week had been and didn't look at their phones while I answered. They hugged me when they left, and no one made a joke at my expense. It was small, but it was real. And for the first time in years, I felt full instead of hollow. Sometimes I still think about that brunch, the way my heart lifted when she looked up and said, "Oh, you made it," and how quickly that feeling faded. I think about the envelope sitting unopened next to her mimosa, and the way no one noticed when I stood up to place it there. I think about how quiet the garage was when I found it in the trash. Not angry, just discarded. Like a version of me they no longer needed. And I wonder what would have happened if she had opened it, if she had read the part where I told her I loved her, even when it hurt. Even when I felt invisible. Would it have changed anything? I don't know, but I do know this. Not everyone deserves to hold the softest parts of you. Not everyone is meant to be in your forever just because they were in your beginning. And when people ask now what happened, I tell them the truth in the simplest way I can. I say, they didn't throw me out, they just forgot I was there. And one day I remembered I could leave. That always gets a pause. Because we're taught that family is everything, that blood means loyalty. But sometimes, the deepest betrayal doesn't come from people who hurt you loudly. It comes from the ones who stop seeing you while you're still standing in the room. I stopped standing in that room. And it's the best decision I ever made. There's a moment after the storm passes when the air feels too still, like even the wind is unsure whether it should return. That's where I lived for a while, between the wreckage of what I walked away from and the foundation of what I was trying to build. No more messages came, no more surprise visits. It was like they finally realized I wasn't playing anymore. And for a while, I braced for some dramatic last act, one final twist where someone begged for forgiveness or tried to rewrite history again. But that never came. Instead, I got silence. Not my silence, theirs, which somehow felt louder than all the noise before it. I expected guilt or anger, even denial. But instead, it was like I'd been erased completely. Like they decided if they couldn't pull me back in, they'd pretend I never existed at all. That might have hurt me once, but now it confirmed everything I already knew. Because people who love you don't erase you to protect their narrative. They don't silence your grief to keep their comfort. They don't call you dramatic after discarding the pieces of yourself you gave them in good faith. They don't show up at your work to scold you for finally stepping out of the shadow they put you in. They don't throw your letter in the trash and expect you to act like it never happened. They just don't. In their version of the story, I vanished, unprovoked, unreasonable, ungrateful. I was the one who left after all the things they did for me. That phrase echoed in my head like a haunting refrain, a reminder that to them, love was transactional and memory selective. They remembered the shoes they bought me in 7th grade, but forgot the day I stood in the rain for an hour after practice, because no one remembered to pick me up. They remembered the vacations they took me on as a child, but not the way I was left out of every group photo after Ethan was born. They remembered sending me to school, but not the nights I stayed up translating their bills or figuring out insurance claims. When Jake messed something up again, they remembered the things they gave that could be measured in receipts. Never the parts of me I gave that couldn't be refunded. I started writing again, not letters, not pleas, just notes to myself. Pages and pages of reminders of who I was becoming now that I'd stepped away. The version of me that wasn't trying to earn his place anymore. The version that didn't apologize for existing in the wrong chapter of someone else's story. I filled notebooks with things I loved and things I forgot I loved. Saturday mornings with no plans. Pancakes that didn't need to be shared. Music turned up too loud. Mornings where I woke up and the first thought wasn't how to make myself smaller so someone else could feel big. And slowly, I stopped expecting closure. Because closure is a myth people chase when they want pain to make sense. But some people never give you closure. They give you silence. They give you gaps. They give you the burden of stitching up wounds they never acknowledge making. And you have to decide if you're going to bleed out waiting or start sewing without their apology. I chose the needle. Around that time, I got an invitation to Ethan's deferred enrollment ceremony. Not from him, from the school. Apparently, he'd re-enrolled late after missing the tuition deadline and scrambling to find funding. I stared at the envelope like it was an artifact from a life I used to inhabit. No one had told me. No one had even thought to ask if I wanted to be there. I wasn't surprised. What struck me was how indifferent I felt. There was no bitterness left, just space. A kind of emotional distance I hadn't known I was capable of. I didn't go. I didn't RSVP. I didn't ask questions. Because that part of the story wasn't mine anymore. Then something unexpected happened. A friend of mine, someone I'd known since college, called me out of the blue. She said Jake had applied for a position at her firm, using me as a character reference. My name, my reputation, my credibility again. I told her the truth, calmly. No drama, just facts. That we weren't close anymore. That I couldn't vouch for his integrity. That it would be best if my name wasn't involved. She thanked me, and I hung up feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Not because I blocked him, but because I finally protected myself first. For years, I had handed my name over like a business card, hoping it would buy me goodwill. Now I knew better. Now I kept it close, not as a weapon, but as a boundary. About 2 weeks later, I saw a post online. Ethan, again. Another cryptic message, something about betrayal and how family should be unconditional. I didn't respond. I just kept scrolling. It didn't sting. It didn't even register as an attack. Because the truth is, if your definition of family only works when someone stays quiet, then it was never unconditional to begin with. It was transactional, and I was done trading. The last time my mother tried to reach out was a short message on my birthday. Thinking of you today, Hope it's a good one. That was it. No apology. No warmth. Just 7 words trying to pretend nothing had happened. I didn't reply. I sat on my balcony with a cupcake from my favorite bakery and watched the lights flicker across the city like tiny promises. I'd bought the cupcake myself, sang to myself, toasted myself, and it was enough. Not because I didn't wish things had been different, but because I finally understood that I couldn't keep bleeding for people who never once offered a bandage. It's strange, the things you carry without realizing it. For years, I thought my anxiety was just mine, that the guilt I felt was a flaw in me. But looking back, I see it now, the 1,000 tiny ways they taught me I was only good when I was giving, only worthy when I was quiet, only valuable when I was useful. And when I stopped performing that version of myself, they called it betrayal, but it wasn't. It was survival. It was self-respect wearing new clothes. It was me deciding that my love wasn't going to live in the trash anymore. One of my new friends asked me recently if I ever missed them, my mom, my brother, the house I grew up in, and I told her the truth. I missed the idea of them, the version I built in my head when I was younger, when I still believed family meant safety. I miss what could have been if they'd tried to love me in the way I needed instead of the way that was most convenient for them. But I don't miss who they are, because who they are didn't see me. Not really. And you can't miss people who never truly held you. So no, I don't call, I don't check in, I don't stalk their socials or linger in old memories. I don't carry the letter in my pocket anymore. I don't wonder if they'll ever change. Because that wondering, that hoping it was a weight. And now I walk without it. Some endings don't happen with fireworks or final words. Sometimes they just fade. Not like the closing of a door, but like the lights slowly dimming in a room no one wanted to be in anymore. That's how it felt with them. Not a bang, not a fight, just a quiet absence stretching into something permanent. I didn't plan for it to end this way. I never sat down and wrote a list of people to leave behind. I just stopped walking toward them. And when I stopped moving, I realized how far I'd been dragging myself for years just to stay close to people who barely noticed if I was there. When you stop forcing connection, you see what was never mutual to begin with. Months passed. Life didn't change dramatically, but it got lighter. My apartment started to feel like home, not just a place to retreat to. The air inside didn't carry tension anymore. My kitchen smelled like things I chose to cook. My playlists weren't background noise to thoughts about how to fix someone else's mess. My nights were quieter, not because I was alone, but because no one was yelling inside my head about who I should be or how I should bend. I woke up without that hollow ache in my chest, the one that used to whisper, "Maybe this time they'll see you." They didn't, and that was the gift. I began to notice how calm my body felt when my phone didn't light up with guilt, how safe it felt not waiting for someone's mood to dictate the day, how good it felt to walk into a room and not scan for proof that I mattered. I realized I'd spent most of my life trying to earn a kind of love that was never meant for me. And that's the thing they never taught me. Love doesn't have to be earned through silence and sacrifice. The right people won't ask you to set yourself on fire just to keep their world warm. The right people will sit with you in the cold if that's where you are. I started building a different kind of family, not bound by blood, but by choice. People who showed up not because they had to, but because they wanted to. People who asked real questions and listened to the answers. People who laughed at my jokes without rolling their eyes and who didn't flinch when I talked about hard things. Some of them knew pieces of the story, most didn't. But they didn't need to. They weren't there to fix my past. They were helping me build my present. And in doing that, they gave me back something I hadn't realized I'd lost: dignity. Not the kind that comes from pride, but the kind that comes from being seen without having to perform. One evening, I came across the box again. The one with the perfume, the dried petals, and the letter. I hadn't opened it since the night I rescued it from the trash. It sat on the top shelf of my closet, not forgotten, just untouched. I took it down and placed it on my kitchen counter. The flowers were completely dry now, their colors muted into fragile shadows of what they'd once been. The perfume still in its packaging, untouched. The envelope still sealed. I looked at it for a long time. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I remembered every word, every line I wrote from a place of hope and vulnerability. And I realized something: I didn't regret writing it. I regretted who I gave it to. Because that letter wasn't for her anymore. It was for me. A timestamp of a version of myself that believed in second chances, even when the first was never honored. A version that wanted so badly to be wanted that he kept knocking on locked doors, hoping the hinges would remember him. I ran my fingers along the edge of the paper, then placed it back in the box. Not because I needed to hold on to the pain, but because I wanted to remember the effort. The effort meant something, even if she didn't see it. Closure never came in the way I thought it would. It wasn't in a conversation or apology or moment of realization from anyone else. It came in small choices, in not responding, in not explaining, in not proving, in letting their silence stay theirs and letting my peace grow in its place. I used to think closure was a gift someone had to give you, but now I know it's something you give yourself when you finally accept the apology that never came and still choose to move on. There's freedom in no longer needing to be understood by the people who misdefined you. Freedom in no longer chasing clarity from those who blurred your existence. I don't sit around waiting for her name to flash across my screen anymore. I don't check if Ethan's made another cryptic post. I don't ask mutual relatives what they've heard. I let it be. I let it all be. One afternoon, I was walking through the park when a little boy ran past me holding a crumpled drawing. He yelled to his mom, waving it like it was treasure. She knelt down, arms open, eyes lighting up, and pulled him into a hug like it was the only thing she needed. I watched them for a second, not with envy, but with understanding. I knew that kind of love once, and I knew what it looked like to lose it. But what I felt in that moment wasn't sadness, it was peace. Because even though I didn't get that story, I finally stopped writing sequels to it. I was done revising the chapters to fit someone else's plot. I was finally the author of my own. Years from now, maybe someone will tell her what happened. Maybe she'll sit with someone and wonder how it got so quiet between us. Maybe she'll tell herself I was too sensitive, too prideful, too hard to please. And maybe that's how she'll live out the rest of her story, telling herself the distance was my fault. But that's fine. She's allowed her version. I just don't have to live inside it anymore. I used to think that choosing yourself meant burning bridges, that you had to destroy something to prove it didn't serve you. But now I know better. Choosing yourself can be quiet. It can be a locked door no one has a key to anymore. It can be a number blocked, a favor unsent, a silence held. It can be a story you stop telling because you finally outgrow the need for it to end a certain way. So here's what I'll say. For anyone who's ever felt like the supporting character in their own life, your voice matters, even if the people closest to you pretend it doesn't. Your effort matters, even if they never thank you. Your presence matters, even if they never save you a seat. And when you decide to stop waiting for recognition that will never come, that's not bitterness. That's clarity. Sometimes healing looks like walking away without announcing it. Sometimes it's letting them feel the absence they created. Sometimes it's putting your letter in a box and moving forward without needing it to be read. No, I didn't get the apology, but I got my life back. And honestly, that's enough. Story 2, I didn't enjoy the new Snow White movie, therefore my girlfriend broke up with me. She thought it showed who I really am. I thought she was kidding, so I laughed. She wasn't. She is now pleading with me to get back together after I'd done this. Have you ever had a moment where you feel as though your life is unraveling in slow motion? However, the music features a Disney princess praising women's rights, while computer-generated birds fly about her as if they're high on coffee, since I have. The night was a Friday. It was one of the few evenings when I didn't have any dishes to do, clothes to fold, or emails to respond to. From the sink, a passive-aggressive whisper was heard. My fiancée of a little more than a year, Lena, had demanded that we watch the latest Snow White movie. I have seen the reviews earlier. I wasn't deliberately attempting to ruin the night, but I also wasn't going to act like this movie was a serious Oscar candidate. It was unwatchable, according to critics, and inadvertently funny. And a cursed TikTok filter that lasted for 2 hours was my particular fave. Lena, however, was thrilled. There will be a reworking of this. As if on her way to church, she informed me in the car, her eyes bright. This time, it's not about a guy saving her. It has to do with inner strength, individuality, and agency. I assumed it was the appropriate boyfriend answer, so I responded something like, okay, I like agency. And I was really interested, When tales are updated, I don't mind. All I want is for the updates to function. We grab popcorn and a half-full theater. Mediocre. Even before the trailers begin, Lena is already crying. The film then starts. It's difficult to describe what we saw. What if a group of marketing interns who had read a feminist blog once decided that subtlety was only for cowards rewrote Snow White? Each dialogue line was a sermon. Each character had the appearance of wanting to break free from the narrative. Snow White and the CGI dwarfs, now reduced to magical forest dwellers, lacked the depth of the terrible queen. Halfway through, it appeared that I had created hobbits that were locked in beta. This musical number was there. In the woodland, Snow White is whirling, singing about governing without requiring love or leading without asking. I'm not sure. It was a fever dream in lyrics. And I gave a little uncontrollable laugh. Not a chuckle, though, just a quiet sigh of incredulity, a sound that any regular person might make while seeing something really uncomfortable. Lena turned to face me as if I had just snubbed her early years. I apologized in a whisper, even though I wasn't. She remained silent. I simply booed as she continued to stare at the TV, as if it were a live feed from a demonstration for women's rights. We left in quiet after the film. I was hoping she would make a joke. Like, well, that was a brave decision, but no. She had a tight jaw. She was inhaling like individuals do before they break bad news that needs therapy right now. At last she talked in the car. It's unbelievable that you laughed. I laughed. I blinked. It wasn't even a whole breath. Ha! As if it had deceived her, she gazed at the dashboard. It goes beyond that. What it says about you, that is. What it states. She faced me. Did you miss it? You made fun of it. I didn't. I just admitted that it was awful, I said. She gave a head shake. It wasn't terrible. It was audacious. Difficult. The mold was broken. It also caused me to lose focus. Incorrect response. She stopped the car without turning it off when she pulled into my driveway. We aren't compatible, in my opinion. I blinked. Hold on, what? You are ignorant of the significance of progress, development, and representation. Because Snow White didn't appeal to me. No, since you found it funny. She lost her temper. Furthermore, you made no attempt to understand the underlying significance. Slowly, I said, Lena, I spent 2 hours listening to what sounded like a sponsored TED lecture with rhinestones. I believe I made an effort. She switched off the engine. This goes beyond a single film. It has to do with your worldview. And if someone doesn't share my principles, I don't think we can be together. You're ending our relationship because I didn't like a 1930s cartoon remake. She remarked, I'm ending our relationship, as she got out of the car, since I recently discovered that the person I've been dating doesn't think progress is possible. She took the wheel once more. I wondered if I had been hallucinating the entire evening as I stood in my driveway with a half-eaten bag of popcorn after closing the door and driving away. Because of this, I understand the value of having principles. I value passion. Even becoming emotional about stories is something I can understand. I didn't cheat, though. I told the truth. I chuckled throughout Snow White, but I didn't yell at her mother or vote against her choice. Suddenly, I found myself without a partner. I sat on my couch that evening, reading negative movie reviews as if they were the answers to my life's questions. Was the bottom of this rock? Perhaps. At least there was frozen pizza and Wi-Fi at rock bottom. I sent my friend Ryan a text. Snow White is the reason I was dumped, he answered. Like the one from Disney? Indeed. Excellent. In any case, you were too normal for her. I grinned a little because, well, it was absurd. It hurt, though. I had taken care of someone who believed I was disposable for a year. When my viewpoint differed from hers, she used a stupid film as a yardstick for judging my value as a person. Furthermore, I was unable to consume all of my popcorn. However, I had no intention of texting her. I had no intention of begging. I hadn't planned on posting about it yet. For some reason, I felt that this had nothing to do with Snow White. Not entirely. Something told me the story wasn't over. Not even close. Breakups are weird. One minute you're sharing playlists and grocery lists, and the next you're sitting on the edge of your bed, wondering if you're allowed to eat the last granola bar without it being symbolic. It had been 3 days since Lena left me over Snow White, and I was still trying to decide which part was more surreal. The fact that she'd walked away from our entire relationship because I laughed during a musical number, or the fact that I didn't even like the original Snow White. I was never invested in the reboot to begin with. The only thing I liked less than Disney's obsession with reboots was paying $18 for the privilege of watching them. And yet, here I was, dumped alone, questioning the metaphysical implications of a CGI forest. I spent the first day after the breakup in silent disbelief. You know, the phase where you replay the conversation over and over like it was a courtroom deposition? I kept thinking, did I say something worse than I remember? Was my tone too sarcastic? Did I trigger some hidden trauma related to enchanted apples? The second day was rage. Not loud, dramatic rage. Just quiet. Simmering. Oh wow. I really did all that emotional labor for someone who ghosted me over a movie. Rage. And by day 3, I moved into analysis mode. That's when the flashbacks started rolling in. The first red flag. The Encanto fight. We'd watched it together last year after the credits rolled. Lena was emotional, teary even. I liked it too. I said the animation was great and the music was catchy. I may have said something like it was nice, not life-changing, but nice. That sentence nearly cost me dinner. She accused me of minimizing immigrant generational trauma. I thought we were still talking about Bruno. Another time, I made the mistake of saying, I didn't really connect with The Handmaid's Tale. I didn't say it was bad. I claimed it made me feel gloomy and forlorn. Lena told me it was a privileged response, and that I had a moral duty to sit with discomfort. I nodded and replied, "You're correct," because at the time I still felt admitting you're correct was an investment in relationship tranquility, not an installment in a slow-moving emotional Ponzi scam. Looking back, the pattern seemed evident. Lena didn't simply adore stories. She weaponized them. Every film, every show, every book. It wasn't simply entertainment. It was a moral litmus test. If I loved the wrong thing, I was misinformed. If I didn't weep at the proper moment, I was emotionally unavailable. And if I disliked something she adored, that meant we were inherently incompatible. But I didn't notice it then, because there were some wonderful times in between those. We laughed about our coworkers and cooked together in a rhythm. Our slippers matched. That, I believed, was significant. Apparently not. I guess I didn't pass the princess test. And the more I thought about it, the more it began to nag in the back of my mind. The manner in which she concluded. She had stated, "This isn't just about a movie. It has to do with your viewpoint and ideals." That was hardly an unexpected line. Like it had been written, revised, and saved in a notes app until the appropriate moment arrived, it was too prepared and too polished. It dawned on me then. Snow White didn't cause her to end our relationship. She had already decided on something. The justification was the movie. In the weeks before the split, the emotional math suddenly made sense. She had been aloof and quietly judgmental. Do you believe you're emotionally present enough in this relationship? Is an example of a loaded question. Or what do you think is the foundation of your moral compass? I believe we were having thoughtful, in-depth discussions at the time. I now understood that I was being assessed based on my ideological performance. I hadn't consented to try out. It was similar to dating a movie reviewer who gave you a review rather than the film. And it led me to yet another insight. I chuckled during Snow White, so Lena wasn't upset about it. She was upset because at last she could point to anything and explain why it wouldn't work. There was no breakup. The argument was a conclusion. Later that evening, I became dangerous intrigued, and looked at her social media accounts. Her Instagram story had a dark screen with white lettering that said, "Sometimes the toughest thing is understanding someone you love doesn't share your values." Using hashtags going future. Let go with a hashtag. Hashtag self-esteem. Snow White is not mentioned. She was obviously portraying me as the emotionally sick antagonist in her own hero's journey, even though it would have sounded insane. At that moment, I became aware of my true feelings, not heartache, not resentment, slander. All right, not in a legal sense. However, the story was being taken over, and I was being subtly transformed into the one who didn't understand, the superficial ex-boyfriend. When it counted most, the man laughed, and I wasn't comfortable with it. I thus took the typical, somewhat petty, and largely sarcastic course of action. I wrote about it only to absorb it, not to point fingers or create a fight. I didn't post on Reddit's homepage or anywhere else public enough to draw criticism, but rather on a moderately large forum. only a place for relationship tales, half outbursts, half introspection. I didn't like Snow White, thus the title was dropped. No, really, I was hoping for a few of responses, perhaps one or two snarky ones. Rather, the feedback began to pour in. It was funny to some. Others told ridiculous anecdotes about their own breakups. One person was fired for stating that they liked Pepsi, and another was fired for not crying throughout The Fault in Our Stars. However, one statement caught my attention. It came from someone who claimed that your viewpoint was not the reason she left you if she ended your relationship over it. She needed an excuse to leave you. That struck a chord because it seemed real. And when I was reading it, Lena's message appeared on my phone. Only a single line. "Can we chat, please?" And I knew there was yet more to this story. "Hey, are you free to speak?" No punctuation or context. Aside from the ellipses, which made the situation worse. An ellipsis is like someone gently tapping on your mental door at 3 in the morning, and when you answer it, you have no idea what they're going to do. For a whole minute, I gazed at her message. I'm not sure if I should laugh. I can either roll my eyes or send it with a letter to the Disney assistance desk. My relationship ended because of your film. Tell me, please. I put my phone face down and locked it after a time. I turned it over again a little later and answered, "What is it about?" She could describe the type of conversation we were having, I reasoned, if she chose to initiate one. Informal catch-up. Finalization. Reunion attempt. Ideological trial. She answered almost immediately. Not via text. Is it possible for us to meet? I was back in the questioning chair in an instant. I was fortunate to have hindsight this time, context, and the thousands of individuals I met online who told me that I wasn't the only one who had been emotionally robbed by criticism in the media. I consented to meet. We decided on neutral ground, a coffee shop, public, brightly lit, a place where it would be necessary to whisper even the most powerful emotional manipulations. I arrived early, placed my order for black coffee, and sat by the window as if I were half afraid of what would happen and half intrigued. Lena showed up 5 minutes late, looking put together but uneasy, as if she had not slept well but had dressed with confidence. She smiled tightly and sat down. I appreciate you meeting me. I gave a nod. Yes. She stirred her tea as if it had personally offended her, and there was an awkward silence. Then she threw herself into it. I've been reflecting on what happened a lot, and I think I may have overreacted, she said. I arched an eyebrow, overreacted in response to your response. I ought to have been more understanding of your viewpoint. It sounded practiced, as if she had rehearsed it aloud before appearing in front of a mirror at least 3 times. I waited. She gave me a hopeful look. Over a movie, you broke up with me? I posted ambiguous, dramatic quotes after saying, finally, as if I had betrayed the resistance. It had nothing to do with you. It really was. She let out a sigh. Well, it might have been, but I didn't anticipate how people would react to it. It was there. There was no apology here. It was damage control for PR. I learned about your post. Her eyes darted up to me as she said, the one in which you made light of the split. I took a drink of my coffee. Okay, didn't name. But I was recognized by everybody. Not at all. I said unless they had previous knowledge of your strong spiritual connection to a movie with 14% on Rotten Tomatoes. She blinked. I smiled nicely, but go on. She leaned forward. I just feel like I was made to appear unreasonable, like I ended things over. Nothing. I wouldn't say nothing, I said. A Disney remake that most people watched with their fingers was the reason you canceled it. You're not getting it. No, I responded coolly. I believe I've finally understood. Snow White's use of it as a pretext did not lead you to end our relationship. She clenched her jaw. You had already decided on something, I went on. You simply had a nice little stage to execute it on, thanks to the movie. Isn't that unfair? She said. For weeks, you've been avoiding me, doubting my morals, and saying strange things like, I don't know if you see the world the right way. I believed we were engaging in meaningful dialogue. I was being interviewed, it turned out. She glanced down, and I walked by till I burst out laughing at the incorrect situation. That didn't get a response. I miss you, instead, she murmured. Yes, I did miss her, so I sat back. She used to laugh at my stupid jokes and give me voice notes about birds she saw on her way to work, and I miss those times. We used to fold clothes on Sundays while watching documentaries, And I missed the late night ramen runs. We were just about done. I didn't miss my trial, though. Walking on eggshells wasn't something I missed. I was still concerned about whether my next movie review would be viewed as immoral. None of stuff was spoken by me. So why did you want to meet? I asked instead. She paused. Perhaps we might try again, I suppose. Even though I still don't like Snow White, that made me grin a little now that we've spent some time apart. Perhaps I exaggerated the significance of it. Slowly, I nodded. Or perhaps you didn't realize how much the rest did. And there it was. I had lost my anger. Not that I was snarky, I was simply worn out. Weary of attempting to use fundamental human differences as proof of profound incompatibility. I'm fed up with partnerships in which appreciating or hating a movie is viewed as a moral position. She didn't respond. For a while, we sat in quiet while the sound of espresso machines filled the room where I should have gone. I'm sorry. She eventually got to her feet. She did say that it was nice to see both of you. She then departed. I lingered, sipping my coffee and gazing out the window. I received a second message later that evening. This one is from someone we both know. Lena has been telling others that you posted that post to manipulate the conversation and emotionally punish her, just so you know. I felt that someone who doesn't buy it should tell you. I didn't respond. I simply sat with it. Because she did, of course. All of a sudden, Snow White wasn't the only topic. It had nothing to do with the split. The narrative of control was at issue. How individuals alter the truth to fit their version of events, and what happens if you politely and discreetly tell them no. And I was certain that I would never return, because you stop apologizing for breathing incorrectly the minute you discover that someone appreciates their perception of you more than you do. At that point, you leave. This time, for real. I still don't like Snow White, though. I didn't respond to the text. The one from our common acquaintance who informed me that Lena was now accusing me of using storytelling as a weapon and influencing public opinion by writing the piece as a kind of punishment. To be sure I wasn't having hallucinations, I had to read that paragraph again, using narrative as a weapon. Yes, I did utilize a few of witty remarks. The popcorn comparison may have been a bit too lyrical for me. However, I suppose I'm some sort of low-budget Bond villain with a Wi-Fi connection and a slight coffee addiction if telling folks the truth about how your girlfriend broke up with you over Snow White now qualifies as psychological warfare. I didn't respond to Lena or the friend. Not to anybody. I reasoned that I may as well graduate with honors if the purpose of the final year of my life was to gradually teach me the value of silence. However, it wasn't as simple as I had imagined to disregard the effects. I received 2 texts from folks I hadn't spoken to in months that weekend. It's never a good way to start a discussion, but both began with some variant of, so I heard about the breakup. One of them was Lena's former roommate, who went on to kindly inform me that Lena was now calling me politically insensitive and emotionally oppressive. It's a big claim to make against someone who once watched a 6-part program about plastic pollution without looking at his phone, I must say. Of course, we should include politically indifferent in the list of offenses. It was nearly amazing. Less than a week after my breakup, I was already being portrayed as an emotionally numb, morally bankrupt zombie who was incapable of comprehending the subtleties of a story. All because when CGI Snow White spoke inner sovereignty, I didn't weep. I once told a buddy that I would have taken notes while watching the movie if I had known the stakes were this high. She chuckled. In actuality, though, I experienced a strange fusion of liberation and dissatisfaction. Anger. Lena was going to fabricate the tale and freedom because, for once, I didn't have to comply, regardless of what I said or did. I began receiving follow-up comments on my initial post by Monday. There was a gradual flow of people commenting with stuff like "you dodged a bullet," but nothing particularly noteworthy. Imagine continuing a relationship in which your survival depends on having a Disney-approved mindset. My brother experienced this, but it had to do with vegetarianism, the way of water, and avatars. In addition to being a strange place, the internet can be therapeutic in the most dysfunctional ways. I didn't want to be thought of as the Snow White person, though. I hadn't planned on leaving that kind of legacy. I had interests. I worked at a genuine job. I once used plywood and my tenacity to construct a standing desk. Something about this whole incident remained with me. even though I had more to give the world than breakup satire. Not the tale, not the drama, not the breakup. Because I came to this realization, Lena's fondness for the film wasn't the issue. The issue was that she treated it as a morals test. And because I was funny, I failed. The movie was never the focus. It has to do with control. I was not meant to laugh either. Instead of earnestly validating her wrath, I was expected to concur. Repeat it more emphatically. Not a man, but a reflection. And she walked while I didn't. Afterward, she described my departure as a personal betrayal of her ideals of femininity, art, and herself. It was strange, it was deceptive, and everything was familiar. When I gave it some thought, I became aware of how many times we had spoken, how often I had been silently correcting myself in the middle of sentences, how many shows I had feigned to enjoy, and how many jokes I had softened in case she didn't catch them, as well as emotionally beneficial. Not because I was scared of her. If I ever said something incorrectly, I was terrified of the new version of myself she would conjure. At the cafe where she enjoyed writing poetry, that version was now being shared with friends, co-workers, and maybe even complete strangers. Now I could hear it. He simply did not understand. When I was weeping, he laughed. He would not expand. However, I did develop. Not in the way she wanted me to, though. I went to the local bookshop on Tuesday morning and purchased a copy of The Uses of Enchantment for myself. The book discusses fairy tales. I give poetic justice a small nod. In addition, I purchased a hot lunch and a coffee, and I watched from the window as a father attempted to get a child out of wearing a plastic sword inside a pet shop. "I'm a king!" the child kept shouting. And, to be honest, the same friend. I merely scribbled on a blank document that I opened when I arrived home, not in reference to Lena, not even the film. I simply think it's weird that people use stories to defend treating one another like movie characters, someone to support or demonize, as if your partner's thoughts on a script could somehow disclose the contents of their soul, and life were all one continuous metaphor. Writing something frank feels wonderful. Just mine, not pretentious or resentful. That's where I am today then. Unmarried. I'm relieved. Though clear-eyed, I'm nevertheless a little irritated whenever someone brings up that film. Rooted. Better still, it's free. No need to tread carefully. Not subject to interpretation. No longer having to watch movies worrying that a single raised eyebrow may become a criticism on my personality. I'm thankful, even if it feels strange to express this out. I'm glad to have left something that felt like surveillance but appeared to be love, and thankful I had somewhere to share the tale. Yes, I did overreact, according to some people. I should have pleaded with her to accept me back, according to others. Some people said, "Dude, it's just a movie." Others assured me that I was not insane and that I was free to laugh. That setting limits is not a sign of immorality. Yes, I am aware that not everything must be put publicly. I'm aware that some people would dismiss this as trivial, but sometimes putting things in paper helps you come to terms with the aspects of your life that didn't make sense at the time. Yes, I was dumped because of a Disney film, and I believe I'm doing well if that is the most ridiculous phrase I ever write. I appreciate you reading. Hey, what are your thoughts? Did I miss something significant, or was I overreacting? Tell me below. Story 3. I was urged by my parents to spend the holidays at home. They left me to sit while they went on a lavish vacation without me after a 5-hour journey. I refrained from arguing. It grinned. However, they began to scream when they returned and witnessed this. Let's go back. I received the first SMS in early December. This year, are you returning home? Then came after. Both your dad and I would find that very meaningful. The one that got me came next. Without you, the holidays aren't the same. I spent a lot of time staring at that one. I had been hoping for a message like that for years. I had heard the statement so many times in my mind that I didn't even doubt it when it really appeared in my email. He grinned. I see. The work had been harsh. There weren't enough people on my team. The way I slept has changed to consist of naps in between Zoom meetings. However, I told myself, they requested you. They are missing you. So I did something I don't often do. I took a break, negotiating with my manager, rearranging deadlines, and pledging to check in just in case took a good week. However, I cleared 5 days in a row. I purchased a ticket, I even brought along a couple modest presents. I hoped we would really converse, play board games, and laugh at corny Christmas films. It was a lengthy and painful flight. Something that smelled like hot cheese-dipped feet was consumed by my seatmate. I didn't care, though. The type of foolish optimism that endures years of disregard and yet appears with a bow on its head was buzzing through me. With my luggage in hand and a smile on my face, I got out of the Uber. For a while, I thought they would surprise me when I saw my dad's car's trunk open and 3 big luggage being crammed inside. Perhaps we were traveling together. This could have been part of the idea. My mom, however, saw me and waved merrily as if I wasn't actually witnessing my holiday ideal dissolve. "She's there," she gave a call. "Right on schedule." I blinked. What is it just in time for? The journey. She spoke as though everything were clear. We were reluctant to abandon Bentley. She pointed to the dog who was standing behind the entrance door, glancing at me. I believed I had misheard. "Are you taking a cruise?" A brief escape. With a smash of the trunk, my dad added, "This year has been tense." Josh, who was in the passenger seat, smiled at me. "Here, you'll be all right. He is in love. Keep quiet. This is ideal for you." He spoke as if I were a robot or a rice cooker, something that's made especially to run quietly. My mother gave me a folded list called Bentley's Holiday Routine while I stood there still holding my bag. It includes things like turning on a lavender diffuser at 8 p.m. and rubbing his ears clockwise rather than counterclockwise. I said nothing at all. I simply grinned and nodded, as I always do when I'm trying not to cry. Already preoccupied, they gave me a quick embrace. I was reminded by my mother to keep Bentley from eating cheese. I was instructed to pick up a delivery that was supposed to happen on Wednesday by my dad. After that, they got into their vehicle and drove off. Nobody inquired about my flight experience. Nobody asked me to accompany them. Nobody even inquired about my meal. Suddenly, I found myself living alone in a house that I pay for, with a dog that I officially adopted but haven't had for years since my younger brother wanted him, and I was unable to refuse him. I secured the door. Bentley crouched at my feet, tail wagging unsurely as he patted over. "Hello, friend." I knelt down to pet him and murmured. He had the stench of damp socks and dirty comforters. He was leaner than I recalled, and his fur was coarse. He had no water in his dish. Something inside me twisted because his nails were too long. I sensed that the food they had left was removed by his water. Sitting on the couch, they gazed at the Christmas lights that flickered, as if they may begin to rearrange themselves into an apology. However, nothing took place. There was silence in the house. The heat turned on, curled into a ball, Bentley. Perhaps they were finally prepared to meet me because I was so certain that this year would be different. Not only as the one who provides the money when the kitchen renovation goes over budget or the automobile breaks down. However, as their sister and daughter, I was mistaken. I felt foolish for ever holding on to the belief that they would someday find me worthy of staying at home if I put forth enough effort, achieved enough success, or proved myself valuable enough. Rather, they viewed me as an easy fix, integrated home security and free dog care, on-time arrival of their own little robot. I made an effort to shrug it off. That was what I had done all my life, making justifications for them, not personal, I told myself, because it was simply difficult to love me. Perhaps if I made a few more changes. I tried not to cry as I stroked my temples. The scent of candle wax and cinnamon filled the air. There were decorations all around me that I wouldn't have placed in a home. I paid for watching a dog, but they didn't thank me for it. The second lost their interest. The novelty faded. What's the worst? I still desired a call from them. I still wanted them to apologize and turn the car around. We were unaware of our affection for you. "Come with us, please." However, they refused. They didn't. Bentley sighed quietly as he slept. After giving him a long look, I went to the kitchen and turned on my laptop. I had no idea what I was searching for. Not exactly, but I was aware of one thing. This wasn't normal, and I wasn't going to keep acting like it was. And perhaps, just possibly, I had had enough of waiting for someone else to notice. Bentley cuddled himself on the couch next to me, putting his weight on my leg as if it would help me stay attached. I didn't mind that he smelled like old shoes and melancholy, and that his fur was patchy and matted. The only one who hadn't gone was him. Like I was still expecting for someone to come out and shout, "Surprise!" I couldn't take my eyes off the empty living room. Actually, we didn't leave you. We were joking. You are loved by us. Nobody did. I had no idea why it struck so forcefully. Perhaps because I had persuaded myself that I was more important than I actually was. That is, if I simply continued to give, they would eventually regard me as more than just the girl who made purchases. Perhaps they wanted that person around. I always believed that they would let me in if I could only correct whatever was wrong with me. Growing up, I assumed that something about me must be flawed. There was a missing component that caused folks to shrug rather than embrace. It was me who was strange, the silent one, the girl who liked to color, code her books, create Excel spreadsheets for pleasure, and prefer to make up arithmetic riddles. You weren't the easiest child to bond with, my mother once said half-jokingly. My brothers started making fun of me when I was 10. Everyone said that it was simply their method of expressing love. They said I was overly sensitive when I sobbed, so I stopped sobbing. It also didn't help. One birthday sprang to mind. They threw me a party when I was, I believe, 8 years old. I was ecstatic. My brothers even claimed to have invited the youngsters from the neighborhood. I pulled out cupcakes and put on my nicest outfit. I created me. However, there were no individuals in the yard when I arrived. Just a sheet of paper with arithmetic problems and numbers on it, posted to the fence. What sort of party are you into? Josh had chuckled. After that, they all hurried to another person's house for the actual party. I spent hours sitting on the porch steps. Even the equations were solved by myself. Perhaps it was the secret, I thought. Perhaps they would return if I figured them all out. They didn't. I believed that I could fit in better by high school. I made an effort to chuckle when appropriate. Despite the fact that the garments didn't feel like mine, I borrowed them from Mandy. To avoid seeming strange, I practiced smiling in front of the mirror and joined clubs I didn't care about. I was still referred to be focused, aloof, and somewhat robotic. You're not ugly, Mandy once informed me. You simply lack the skills necessary to behave like a true female. People continued to forget to invite me despite my efforts to learn. The person who solely received thank you messages in response to Venmo requests. The one who repeatedly listened. Simply put, you're quite difficult to approach. My parents told me, "We're proud of you, honey, but just don't let it go to your head," after I was accepted to an Ivy League institution. They did not attend the commencement. They said that aircraft tickets were too costly, until I saw pictures from Josh's birthday vacation to Cabo the same week. I thought they were real. They simply had a stronger connection with him, I assured myself, and it wasn't personal. They would start seeing me if I could only be more of something. I received my degree. I was hired. Whenever they requested money, I sent it. The mortgage on the home they occupied was paid by me. In fact, I assisted Mandy during her divorce. Perhaps, I reasoned, generosity could take the place of intimacy. Perhaps if I put enough effort into them, I would ultimately make up the difference. However, if someone has chosen not to love you, no amount of giving can change that. I felt it at last, sitting on that couch with Bentley snoring into my hip. Nor rage, nor even treachery. Only a dull, slow realization. In their lives, I served as a stand-in. I felt like the world's most stupid person when I saw a financial plan in human form and realized that I could have been more. As if they couldn't be bothered to keep the house clean, I glanced about at the mess they'd left behind, including half-packed boxes, filthy dishes, and food on the countertops. Even when it was my first time home in a year. Because I wasn't truly a visitor in their eyes, I served as the built-in safety net, the accountable party, and the assistance. Bentley appeared slimmer than I had recalled. His water dish smelled strange, and his nails were excessively long. He whimpered a bit, as if he had been waiting weeks for someone to notice him when I knelt down to stroke behind his ears. My head was leaning on the wall. Perhaps I was the issue after all. I could be difficult to adore. Too clinical, too silent, too weird. In an attempt to identify the exact moment I became invisible, I relived every interaction I had ever had with my family. Perhaps I shouldn't have gone. Perhaps my success made me conceited. Perhaps I gave up trying. Or perhaps they made no attempt at all. I formerly believed that setting limits was a sign of selfishness, because the only ones who said no were those who were unkind. That sacrifice was necessary for love, particularly when it was painful. Now, However, all I felt now was little, exhausted, and finished. As I got up, Bentley groaned softly. I offered him a treat. I filled his bowl with new water after finding it in the cupboard. I then went to open my laptop at the kitchen table. I just knew that something had finally changed inside of me, but I had no idea what I was doing. Not broken, not detonated. I typed and just shifted. If a family resides in your home for free, what should you do? I spent a lot of time looking at the search results. I wasn't sure if I would actually follow through on anything. My sense of authority was lacking. I was not feeling smart. I simply felt finished. Let them assume I overreacted and was aloof. Let them express themselves as they see fit. They had it already. Bentley pressed his nose on my palm. I gave him a gentle head rub before whispering, "If there's a problem with me, at least I'm taking action at last." On one of the pieces, I hit print. Slowly, as if unsure too, the paper slipped off the tray. It was a Sunday evening when they returned. I remained there. Due to a family emergency, my supervisor let me to work from home. Bentley sprung out of his dog bed and gave a more startled than enthusiastic yelp. So I knew exactly when the car came into the driveway. My heart was racing more than I cared to acknowledge as I remained still in the corridor. It was like hearing an alarm in a once secure area. The car door slammed. Voices. Out loud. Known. Inconsiderate. My mother laughed and added, "I told you she'd be fine. She adores solitude. It's likely that she rearranged the cupboard for amusement." Josh continued to chuckle. I remained still. I simply observed through the crowds. The first person to notice was Mandy. She pulled, jiggled the handle, and pulled again. I pictured her eyebrows raising in perplexity. The gradual rise in entitlement. The door is locked. Why? Dad gave his key a try. Nothing. Josh took the next step and attempted to shoulder it. I snatched Bentley up before he could become any more agitated when he barked again, louder this time. My arm shook a little, not precisely out of dread or anything else, something more subdued. Final. Then there was a knock. "Lucy, get out!" The lock is stuck. Bentley and I sat on the couch as I caressed his ears. One more knock, then more forceful, then beating fists. "What the devil, Lucy? Have you replaced the locks?" I didn't respond. I replaced the locks 3 days after they departed. But not because I was angry. I had a lot of that. Practically speaking, however, the house was a disaster. Bentley had been left behind. Damage was evident in several of the rooms. Doors were not locked. Garbage that is overflowing. I had every right to safeguard the house because I was the rightful owner. Before I took any action, I sought legal advice. And now they were back, assuming that everything would still be about them. "You can't do this," Mandy cried. "This is our home." The floodgates opened at that point. "Now, Lucy, open this fucking door. With the dog in the home, we trusted you. Furthermore, you don't have the right to just shut us out, as it always was. This isn't simply yours. 6 years ago, when I purchased this property, it was meant to be a backup plan, something transitory. While they were residing here, I made the mortgage payments, only until they were able to stand again. They never departed for some reason. In their imaginations, the house somehow became theirs, and I turned into some kind landlord who owed them regular revenue in silence. Slowly, I got to my feet. My hands were shaking, but not in the same way. Fear wasn't the reason. Adrenaline was the cause. My choice is being followed by my body. I approached the front door, but chose not to open it. I just used the closed frame to speak. I took possession of the property. With a calm voice, I said, "It was in bad shape when you left it. Bentley was left unattended. They unlocked the home." I talked to an attorney. Quiet. Then Mandy's angry and loud voice. "You're crazy. Simply changing the locks because you feel like it isn't an option." I had no desire to do so. I answered. "I took the required precautions to keep my house safe, and I am the rightful owner." Josh began shouting that he was going to sue me. When Dad suggested that we skip church for my math competition, his voice soared in a level I hadn't heard since I was 15. "What a sour brat you are." I chuckled after everything that we had done for you. I didn't intend to. Even I was shocked by the shrill, breathless sound you just made. "All that you have done for me," I said it again. "You mean the financial black hole, the free babysitting? Or did you joke about leaving me alone with arithmetic problems at the birthday party?" More shouting. I turned to go. I informed my lawyer over the phone that they had arrived. She instructed them not to open the door and to inform them that any correspondence should henceforth be sent via her office. Josh then tried to pry open the kitchen window by going around the side. From the porch, Mandy let out a shriek. My mother sobbed loudly enough for the neighbors to hear her standing in the yard. Incredulous that the waitress had just given him the bill, my dad paced. I made a police call. I gave the deed, pictures showing the state of the house, and the veterinarian's report from Bentley's examination to the authorities when they got there. The cops were at ease. Expert? They turned to my dad, one of them. She owns the house, sir. No leasing agreement exists. She is fully authorized by law to take possession of the property. Will you simply allow her to harm us in this way? My mother sobbed. According to the police, she hasn't committed any crimes. Nobody stood up for my family, for once. Nobody made me the antagonist by twisting the narrative. There were no jokes about me or pitying glances. Just the facts. Just limits. Just me being wounded. The police suggested that they go and allow any disagreements to be resolved via official legal procedures. My family was in a state of shock, enraged, embarrassed. However, they eventually departed. Their car pulled out of the driveway, and I watched from the window. I was flicked off from the passenger seat by Mandy as she turned. Josh yelled something that I was unable to hear. My mother didn't turn around, and I didn't feel like the one left behind for the first time in my life. Uncomfortably, Bentley crawled into my lap, anchoring me with his weight. "We'll be all right, I believe," I muttered. I had always hoped that they would accept me if I simply repaired myself, that people would notice me if I put forth enough effort, smiled enough, and contributed enough. But I didn't need to be fixed. Perhaps I wasn't broken because I was the silent one. It may have made me I refrained from crying. I believed I might. However, no more tears were shed, just a strong throbbing feeling of something else. Relief, strength, calm. I had lost my anger. Not even wounded, just finished. And occasionally it has greater force than anger. That should be the end of it, I thought. However, my family and others don't lose in silence. Not when they have spent decades using entitlement as their love language. After they went, I began getting emails 3 days later. My dad came last, followed by my mother and sister. Confusion gave way to anger, and then to desperate manipulation. "We are ashamed of you. Why you're doing this is beyond us. Lucy, you're exaggerating. You're not like this." And lastly, Mandy's cherry on top. "Do you really need assistance?" I didn't answer. I sent all of this to my lawyer. The escalation followed. They made another attempt to break in. Presuming I'd be gone, this time in the middle of the night. The security camera captured everything when the motion sensor lights turned on. My dad and Josh were attempting to force the rear door with a crowbar. Once more, the police arrived. My lawyer is pressing charges this time. They attempted to claim that I had stolen the house and that it was theirs. They had some verbal agreement, but it was a falsehood to them. However, there were no records, leases, or evidence. Just their arguments becoming weaker and their voices growing louder. Then they did what I should have anticipated. I was sued. Really, it was comical. A shoddy civil lawsuit alleging that I had unlawfully evicted them, that I was having a mental breakdown and needed to be taken out of financial management of the property since I had stolen the dog. They seemed to say that I posed a risk to the family's welfare. I should have been shaken by it. It may have destroyed me a year ago. I had stopped flinching, though. I wore a gray pantsuit to the first hearing, my hair pushed back and my face inscrutable. The most of it was handled by my lawyer, although I spoke calmly when asked to. I outlined the schedule, the payment records, screenshots of the messages requesting money, pictures of Bentley's condition, the report, the break-in film, and the emails were all done by the home. He was uninteresting, methodical, airtight. Their only responses to the judge's request for proof of their allegations were evasive answers and exaggerated charges of betrayal by family members. The case was dropped. They were humiliated when they exited the courthouse. On her way out, Mandy has something for me. I didn't hear it. I had stopped listening. That should be the end, but it's not. My renter was located by them. The new renter. One evening, Rachel texted me. "Your sister came here yelling, claimed to be regaining her home." I needed to phone the police. If she wanted to leave, I offered to end her lease. She declined. Kinda like the drama, to be honest. You weren't joking either. This location is stunning. I obtained a restraining order and stepped up security. It was approved. This time, the judge didn't even think twice. The law was on my side for the first time in years, not in opposition to me. Not as a side effect of an environment in which I was often disregarded or overruled. They were listening to me, and it began to settle in gradually. My family was still with me. I had lost folks who didn't think highly of me, individuals who viewed me more as a resource than a human being, and the harvesting of me was finished. 6 months later, fast forward. With a window view, a plush rug, and 3 plush toys that he only acts as though he doesn't like, Bentley now has his own space at my apartment in New York. The entire home is rented. Rachel's lease was extended. She didn't bat an eye when I modestly increased the rent. I've saved money at last, actual savings. I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment after leaving the little studio. I purchased a plant as well. It is still alive. A miracle. According to my therapist, I should be glad because being cut off from your family does not imply that you are broken. It indicates that you are at last donning your own oxygen mask first. I confessed to her that I felt bad for being so relieved. That's called peace, she answered with a smile. Then I got to know Alex. There was no drama. 2 folks who both detested networking gatherings ended up hiding close to the bar and making fun of the buzzwords that were all around us. He was employed in the financial industry. 2 distinct fields. The same weariness. He didn't interrupt me. When I told him I enjoyed spreadsheets, he didn't bat an eye. He genuinely listened when he inquired about the types of formulations I created for enjoyment. He smiled and remarked, I don't know, when I informed him that my family believed I was robotic. I've encountered robots with a smaller emotional spectrum. I hadn't laughed that hard in months until that moment. Since then, we have been seeing each other. No performative chaos, no games. Simply relax. While I was assembling Bentley's new orthopedic dog bed the other day, he stopped by. Being the human equivalent of beige wallpaper was my sardonic remark. You're not beige, he added, tilting his head in my direction. You're made of titanium. Keep quiet, robust, and unyielding. Later, when I was alone myself in the kitchen, and Bentley was curled up on the floor like a weary little witness to everything I had experienced, I started crying, even though I hadn't at the time. I used to believe that I was flawed. I finally understand what went wrong, allowing others to treat me as though I were unimportant, and I no longer do it. That's what transpired. I've heard from some that I went too far. I should have done it years ago, according to others. To be honest, I'm still learning. Was I finally establishing limits, or was I being callous? Was this fair? Or is it simply the end of years of silence? I'd love to hear your thoughts, but I don't have all the answers. Did I make the correct decision? Did I respond too quickly, or did I overreact? Tell me in the comments below, and if you'd want to hear more tales like these from folks who've had enough and taken action, go here. Sign up.